I am Scott Berdahl. I'm the CEO of Snowline Gold Corp. We are a newly listed company on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the symbol SGD, and we are exploring for gold in the Yukon territory. We're targeting big district-scale gold systems, and we're fresh off our first year where we made 2 discoveries on 2 separate gold targets. Yeah, thanks for having me, Merlin.
Scott, great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Snowline Gold, completely new to me. Could you give me a quick background to how you got here and kind of how you came to be listed, and kind of just the brief history of the company would be great.
Sure. So we are a new company. We listed in March, but we're certainly not a new endeavor. We actually, the company stems from my family's and my father's prospecting endeavors that go back into the 1980s in the Yukon territory, where we live and where I was born and raised. And we've covered a lot of ground in the territory over the past 30 years, and I've been helping out for the past decade and a half in a big way. And we've sort of built a private prospect generator, and we've operated in that framework for a long time and had a lot of success that way. But Snowline is our first foray into the public sector. We corralled 7 of our 21 projects, sort of all the gold-focused projects that had what we saw as multi-million ounce potential in sort of big greenfield, new idea sort of spaces, and we put those into Snowline. And so we are launching the company, having, and these are new ideas, but they're not. It's not like we're just drawing on a map and going after it. It's we've given these a lot of thought, and we have a lot of evidence to back it up. And essentially that comes in the form of past option deals, particularly in the 2010 to 2012 boom that happened up here and globally. We had, at one point, we had over 1% of the Yukon territory staked and optioned out to various companies. And of course, a lot of that came back as moose pasture, but we got good data showing that's moose pasture, so we know not to go there. And but some of the other ideas worked out in very nice fashion. And we have some really compelling targets that were just handed back to us at our flagship area over in the eastern Yukon. We really stumbled into an area that had seen almost zero exploration prior to our involvement, and came back with huge data sets, baseline geochemistry, high resolution over a large area, like 100 kilometers by 100 kilometers, and with targets that are kilometer scale, even tens of kilometers scale in this area and with discoveries on surface to grab samples to 152 grams per ton gold with visible gold. So these things, I mean, it's a sign of the times in 2012, 2013. I'm sure many of your viewers have, lived through that and understand what was happening then. But just to get projects like that handed back to us, and then we had to keep them on life support for a long time. So we're very happy now to have found the enthusiasm and found the momentum again to bring these projects back online and to explore them.
Well, I mean, that's quite a history, quite a story of going back right through to the 80s. Now the Yukon's not for the faint-hearted. It's kind of big country. I say that having never been there, but just looking at it on the map and looking at the pictures. Was going public, was a lot of that, the rationale was to get some proper capital behind the company to fund the exploration. And remind me, how much did you raise when you came to market, and what's the cash position at the moment?
Well, we raised about 7 million out of the gate. And at the moment we are down to around 2 million. But we are in the midst of a raise as well for another 7. So that will ideally, once we get all the papers shuffled around, put us at 9 million going into next season. So we're positioned to explore quite aggressively again next year and to upscale things quite a bit. And as far as the rationale for taking it public, you're absolutely right. It's there's only so far that you can take projects on. When you're going out of pocket, especially if your pocket is not particularly deep. You can get to a project to a certain stage, and then the next obvious thing is, okay, we've proven this target every which way that we can on the surface. That's, the story holds up. We need to drill it, and so that's where a lot of Snowline's targets are, or a lot of targets are on our flagship project. So we drilled 2 this year, and I think it shows that our surface work was on the right track. That we hit 2 discoveries on these 2 drill 2 drill programs, and we have a lot more targets out there. So it's.
I noticed that your shareholder register from the existing shareholder register, you've got a lot of kind of geological expertise on there. You've got a lot of people who are well versed in the mining sector. They've made a lot of money in the mining sector, and in a sense, they've got the ability to kind of have a go, a spin of the wheel on a kind of a new new company with good big prospects in an area which is highly prospective, looking for big targets. Is that shareholder register changing? Are you getting more people in? I mean, you've had some great successes this year. We'll get into the detail of the technical side of things, but are you seeing new money coming in saying, actually, hang about, we like what you did, we're joining you? Or is it more still on that kind of geological specialty, that expertise on the new raise that's coming through?
There's definitely a mix. All of our key shareholders are coming back. And then we do have a lot of new names that have popped up. One individual contacted me and he's bought 5% of the company on the private market. So that was, that was great to see that kind of enthusiasm. And I think that the geological focus of some of our early investments speaks to, again, the potential that we see in these rocks, and that is sort of easily communicable to other people who look at the rocks and who get what we're chasing out there. And so just seeing that enthusiasm for these ideas out of the gate, I think, is a testament to that. And now with this first year and these, the discoveries that we've made and the grades that we've gotten into, I think that makes it a little bit more appealing to a broader audience when you see, okay, that's a great story, but these are great intercepts. So we're happy to get behind this now. And so we are seeing other players step in, but certainly we're having a lot of support from the initial investors as well.
When I started researching the company, I went to, I think it must have been an old presentation, or maybe I'm not, anyway, I saw a presentation that had results up until June, July, and the first few holes at Einarson. And I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, it felt quite like a kind of an academic or a kind of a science project-y approach. And then when I went through the later news releases, I thought, oh, hang about, they're actually onto something here. It would be really useful if you could you show me a map of where you are, just to put me in context in the Yukon, just so I kind of get my bearings a bit.
Sure. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. There we go. A new light on the Yukon. There we go. That's you.
Exactly. And that was, that's really what we're looking to do. We're looking at areas in the Yukon that haven't seen a lot of exploration, not because of a lack of geological potential, but just because the Yukon itself is quite underexplored and there are still huge blank spaces on the map. And so that's where we've been looking, and that's where we've been finding some very interesting things. As I mentioned, we've kind of honed in on one area as our flagship. You can see the stars on this map are Snowline projects, and there's a cluster of projects out in the eastern Yukon, just northwest of the prolific McMillan Pass area. And that's really where we've honed in this year, with drilling a target, the Jupiter target at Einarson and the Valley target at Rogue. I'll just zoom in on that area on a subsequent slide here. So so there you can see East Central Yukon, it's really an interesting geological area. Rocks very analogous to the Great Basin rocks in Nevada that have been folded around and intruded by Cretaceous age. Clearly gold-associated intrusions that are related to those at Fort Knox in Alaska, and here in the Yukon we have the Eagle mine operating. So these are fertile passive margin rocks that are intruded by fertile intrusion. So it's a very good place to be looking. And despite that, particularly in the Einarson area, there was zero gold-focused exploration prior to our going in there in 2010. So a lot of companies do talk about underexplored areas. We have unexplored areas, and it's quite obvious actually when you step in on some of these targets. And for example, in the top right of this slide, that float, you can see that big rusty quartz boulder. That thing, I don't know the grade of that particular boulder, but these things were running anywhere from a half gram to 25 grams. So and generally around 3 to 7 grams. And so these are well mineralized boulders that stretch for about 3 kilometers down this creek, and yet nobody had ever staked this creek before, which shows that no economic geologist or no prospector had ever walked up this creek before. So sorry.
And that's in the Jupiter zone, is it? So that's you've got that very strange looking license area. And am I right in thinking that there we go, it says on the slide there, you've got a controlling 70% interest, pursuing 100% reconsolidation. Could you just talk to the kind of the process of owning 70% there, and then how you might end up with 100% on it?
Sure. And so, yeah, that comes back to what I mentioned about optioning out a lot of ground. That was our business model previously. We were basically a private prospect generator. And Einarson, we had optioned out to a company that did a substantial amount of baseline work out there. And they had their own small block that they also explored. And then they optioned basically a Luxembourg-sized area, like at 80 kilometers by about 60 kilometers of just solid block. As far as I know, it's the biggest claim block ever to have been staked in the Yukon. And they got out there and they've done high resolution baseline stream sediment sampling, like every 500 meters or every 250 meters down different streams throughout this whole area, having samples. And so some targets just light up right away like that. And under the terms of that deal, they had an option to buy 30% and an option to buy 70%. And so they exercised the option for 30% when things were happening, times were good.
Classic stage earning. They got the 30%, but they didn't go far enough to get the remainder.
Exactly, and then the wheels kind of fell off the cart as they didn't have the sort of drill results that we have, with having had the benefit to carefully look at their data and then collect our own and really hone in on the targets. And so when they let that option expire, we were looking for the next thing to do. And you mentioned the funny shape of Einarson, and that's fair. It was the largest claim block. It's still one of the largest, but it's probably a quarter of the size that initially was, just due to our own limited resources and how much we wanted to allocate to just to holding on to large tracts of land. And so we've been able to basically whittle that down to a more efficient land position where we're covering what we see as, based on the evidence that we have and the data that we have, the most prospective areas and the most prospective trends.
Okay, so you've let's jump straight into what you found. Let's go to kind of the end of your drilling program. You raised $7 million. You put $5 million into the ground in two major drilling programs. Let's do Einarson first, and then we can do Rogue after that. So if you've got any, okay. Can you pull up a slide for me to look at way there?
I do. Here, I'll start with this. It's a little noisy, but there's a map on the left. It might take a second to kind of digest what you're looking at there, but basically the yellow in the background is the outlines the zone of anomalous to elevated to anomalous golden soils. Red areas have anomalous arsenic, and then there's a little blue patch with some antimony there, and that's just it's cut by the general fabric going up to the northwest, and so this is where we started out. We just had the soil anomaly in the float train that I mentioned. It's actually a blind target, so very tough to figure out exactly where to drill. You have some nice soils numbers, but what do you do with that? And to what extent has there been glacial transport, et cetera?
Sorry, so just to get my head around this, the main fabric is northwest. I can see those inferred structures, and you've even got an inferred regional thrust somewhere. I can't see where that is, but anyway, you've got these structures which are running northwest, southeast. You've got the main gold anomaly, which seems to be lying kind of across it, north-south. And within that, you've got arsenic anomalies on the structures. Do you have, what's the kind of cover here? How much outcrop have you got? Is there glacial till? Is it easy to map? Yeah.
It's not easy to map. There's a lot of cover. There's a series of outcrops along a stream that cuts sort of to the south east of the northwesternmost holes there. If you can follow the topo lines, you can see a few little nicks where that form a valley bottom, and the cover is pretty thick in places. I say pretty thick, but maybe 10 meters at the most, and generally 2 to 10 meters. Which is, it's not a problem from a drilling or a mining perspective, but certainly from an exploration standpoint, it makes it pretty hard to tell what you're looking at. And then there is glacial till, and I do think that maybe this is a rose-colored glasses sort of a view on it, but it certainly looks like, especially the northwest, that you get into thick till cover, and essentially everywhere west of that stream, you have these thick terraces of till that you can just see, and some of it's sort of alluvial material that's come down, maybe backed up against the side of a broader valley glacier. And so I think that there is a lot of geochemical masking there. So that north-south signature of the geochem anomaly looks to be more of a reflection of the current topography and current erosional environment rather than necessarily the underlying mineralogy. But
so you're effectively saying that it might be truncated to the northwest by that blue shading just because there's glacial till over it, but actually you as a team think that there could be a continuation up to the northwest, and actually the line to follow is the structure rather than the north-south of the perceived gold trend that we can see today on this map.
That's definitely a strong possibility, yes. And it makes a lot of sense with the structures, but I wouldn't even call it truncated. I get what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying, but yeah, it's basically just potentially masked. So yeah, it would continue on up there, and then there's just too much till there to really pick up on that. But that's speculative at this point, and of course we're very happy to have the 3 kilometer soil anomaly that we do have. This image or shows about 1.5 kilometers of it.
I meant truncated on the map. I wasn't assuming that it wasn't geological continuity and all of that kind of stuff. So the first few holes, which I think I looked at in an earlier presentation, were the ones in that shaded antimony area. But it seems as if your later holes have got visible gold and better grades.
It is, earlier you talked about how we kind of started off academically and things have gotten to be more maybe conventional. And I mean, that was really it. I mean, it was an academic idea. I know people don't want to fund science projects, but ultimately this is science. We are looking for gold deposits based on what we know. And so we started out with these scientific principles in mind with good evidence to back them up. But we ultimately had to start somewhere, and based on analogs that we've seen elsewhere, keeping in mind that this is a blind target, so you have this soil, what do you do with it? And one of the clear sources of this float train was this antimony-rich area, so that's where we started, and we drilled with a kind of a higher density there too, because you put one hole down and you have a very one-dimensional picture of what's going on underground. So if you can steepen that, and if you can kind of get a few holes drilled in, you get a better sense of what's going on. And at that point, not really knowing what we were into or what the potential was, we poked around there a fair bit trying to, and we were getting sniffs, 1.5 meters of 1.4 grams and 7 meters of 4 grams. And so some of those are, getting to be pretty nice hits, but ultimately, as we decided, okay, we've tested this target to the extent of our abilities this year, let's use our resources to kind of step out a bit. And then stepping to the south, certainly we got into a much more exciting zone there, as you can see in those figures. And then again, with that same rationale, with 2 holes left on the project, or just within our budget and our timeline for the year, figuring, okay, do we want to double down here where we're getting good grades, or do we want to step out even further? And so we did. We went on to a totally blind target in that there was nothing to recommend where to drill. In the south, we had some linear features in the topography, like it was all till covered, but you could see these little linear zones that corresponded to where the directions we thought that the faults would be running there. And in the north, there was just nothing. It was just the geochem. And so it's not something we would have drilled early on, but we decided to, based on the strength of the results in the south, we decided to move the drill up there just to take a shot while we could. And sure enough, we got into the visible gold, and we are still awaiting assays on those holes. And just to zoom in on that, this is that area in the south. This is a very schematic hypothetical cross section interpreting the intervals, which are very real and not schematic. Those are shown in yellow, just grades as a histogram along the drill holes, and then these red zones are sort of just an inferred trace based on core angles and the connecting the dots really between those holes. And what it looks like may be happening there. But you can see what we're pretty excited. It's one thing to find a decent grade, like a 6 grams per ton boulder, say in the stream, that's a meter wide. Like that's a pretty outstanding thing to find. But what does that mean when you look underground? Does that mean that there's just a single vein that's a meter wide running 6 grams? Because that's not going to be very interesting out here. So we were very pleased to see not only higher grades, but also thicker intervals and also multiple intervals per hole. So yeah, we couldn't be more pleased with what we got into out there.
I like the I always like a nice simple interpretation. If you've got, you could draw all kinds of folds between those drill holes with your mineralized zones, but I do like a nice simple fit. And those subhorizontal gently is that I can't see what orientation it is, but just gently dipping to the right of the page. That's very encouraging, and it's quite shallow. So that's only down to about 160 meters, 170 meters. Lots of zones of mineralization. What's the plan for next year? Are you going to continue testing new targets? Are you going to increase your drill density on the bits that you've already found? How many meters are you going to be committing, and how much money are you committing to Jupiter?
That's a great question. And it really depends a bit on, I'll just go back to this map slide just for the sort of overview. But it does depend a bit on what the remaining assays say, and not just here, but also at our Rogue project, which is at the south of here, and how we want to allocate our budget next year. So some of those questions remain to be answered pending forthcoming assay results. So, from where we are right now, I would like to basically strike a balance between those two approaches. Clearly, with holes 20 and 21 on the north there, we showed the value in continuing to step out and continuing to prove the scale of this system, and maybe stumbling into additional targets with very high grade zones. We don't want to just get lost in the weeds on one little zone and at the expense of missing out on a Muruntau or something like that. And so one can dream. Everyone wants a
Muruntau.
Exactly. But at the same time, we don't want to, there is a lot of value in doubling down and in starting to define that continuity, getting a better picture of, are those folds? And, maybe if they are folds, as opposed to my gentle, nice, simple interpretation, maybe that tells us a lot about how to continue drilling and how to continue exploring. Obviously, the majority of ore bodies, and certainly an ore body in this sort of environment, is probably not going to be extremely simple in terms of its geometry. And so the more clues we have and the better idea we have of its continuity, that does have value. And it also allows us to start to build out a resource. So I'd like to strike a balance where we are testing the limits of this system, where we are looking at how big it can get and figuring that out, figuring out what the constraints are, and at the same time getting more information that we can use to start building it towards a resource and to and get a better sense of exactly what's going on with the mineralization, which will help our stepping out as well.
There's always the observation that exploration companies typically start on their best targets. Once you've compiled your data set and you've got everything to hand, you say, right, we're going to do Jupiter, we're going to do Rogue, and then you've got another one. What was it called? Tosh, which I particularly liked. I like the name. I like the assays. And there's also, I don't know if it is the same phrase in Canada, but we say that a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. You're onto something, and it's always worth pursuing what you can see. You've mentioned already that there's a lot of cover, that exploration in the area is not necessarily that easy. So yes, you do want to step out. You do want to make sure you're not missing the Muruntau. But equally, you don't want to blow your brains out looking for something when you've already got something.
No, that's we certainly do have that expression, and I agree with that completely. I think there is that balance to be struck, both at the deposit, or I'm getting ahead of myself, at a deposit scale, and at the at the regional property scale, because we did start on our most promising targets, and perhaps they are our best targets, but we are in an environment where knowing so little going into it, or having such a big greenfield area, that the most obvious target out of the gate isn't necessarily your best target. And so at Rogue, for example, we're targeting these big, it's a different style of mineralization. What we're talking about at Jupiter, I guess I got ahead of myself a little bit. These are sort of epizonal orogenic deposits or occurrences. And this looks to be, to us, have some striking similarities to, what's moving the needle a lot in Newfoundland these days, these very shallow quartz-hosted systems coming through siltstones, mudstones, and sandstones, and these very unaltered sedimentary rocks, and similar also to like Fosterville and Bendigo down in Australia. But just to go back to, sorry.
Bendigo is famous for its saddle reefs, and in a way, I could almost see that in your stacked mineralized zones in that cross section you showed earlier.
That could well be. Yeah, we see both parallel tube bedding and cross cutting relationships in the quartz. So we haven't really nailed it down, but it could be sort of a hybrid between the two, or it could very well be saddle reefs. So that is to be determined, and one of those things that the infill drilling will help us figure out.
I mean, it's incredibly early days. I've got a kind of a rule of thumb that just say that until you've got about 40 holes into something, you're not even sure that you're drilling in the right direction, unless it's really, really clear. You know, it can take you a while to work out the fabric and the all of the structural complexities of an area. And even then, I mean, if you look at Hemlo, for example, it's taken decades for them to sort out or to begin to understand the structural complexity at Hemlo.
Yeah.
So you're very early in the process. And remind me, how many you've done 21 holes at Jupiter, and how many holes are you waiting to come back?
We're waiting for 5 more holes at Jupiter, including those 2 in the north where we did hit the visible gold. So
okay, and they should be back. They should be back in January, February.
I would hope they'll be back by the end of this month. This being December, but it's a little bit out of our hands. And then we drilled 4 more holes at Rogue just towards the end of our season, and those we're looking to get back in early January. But we're going on lab estimates. I think they're trying hard to get through a pretty huge backlog this year, and hopefully we get them sooner, or hopefully we get them on that schedule at the very least. But we shall see.
Can we have a look at some of the core and some of the maps at Rogue?
Absolutely.
And what was the stimulus behind the drill campaign here? Let's say it was one of the top 2 best looking things at an early stage of understanding in the area.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll take that opportunity to jump back to your earlier question on, just relating to the best targets. And this was, so Rogue covers an area of these mid-Cretaceous intrusions. And like it says on the slide here, very similar intrusions to those that are causing mineralized systems at Fort Knox and at Eagle, multi-million ounce producing deposits. And Valley it's a newly discovered intrusion. Again, it's about 1 kilometer in scale. So it also highlights the unexplored nature of this district is that it doesn't even show up on the existing geological maps of the area. So, that's a pretty big feature for an outcropping intrusive to be missed altogether. And not only that, but, you go look at it and you can see in the bottom right here, this sheeted veining. And so when you start to sample that and you get nice grades, we had grab samples of the sheeted veining running up to 16 grams. And nearby, there are some higher grade sulfide-rich structures that you see around the edges of these intrusions and other systems. Those were assaying up to 152 grams. And so, this is a pretty low-hanging fruit in terms of an obvious target to drill. That said, these systems are often the most fertile at the highest reaches. They'll form sort of a brittle carapace that later fluids come and break up. And that can be, you can have very big systems without that. But you also get into, when you do have that intact, it makes for a very attractive target, but it also makes for a harder target to explore. And so at our adjacent Gracie target to Valley, we do have what looks like an intact carapace. There's no there's no intrusive outcrop there, but you do have the hornfells. You do have a geophysical signature consistent. And so you have this sibling intrusion. You can see like this is Valley and the erosion level comes down to where we can explore it. Gracie's here and this whole carapace would be intact. And we're just seeing the top of that. So that would be more difficult to explore without the justification of finding something at Valley.
But you've got indications at the other ones, right? Valley and
Gracie.
And so, and as you're saying that there's a carapace at Gracie, but and are they? What can you see at Gracie? Are you seeing some mineralized structures? Are you seeing the geochemistry coming through? We
are. There is good looking geochemistry there. We're waiting some of our more comprehensive geochem that we've done this summer. It's in the assay backlog with everything else. But we do have grab samples there that assay up to 56 grams per ton gold. So again, looking like there is gold kicking around through there. And then you do see intense hornfells So that's that's when you get the sediments that are just cooked by nearby heat source in a relatively low pressure environment. And so the only way that that's really happening is if there's something right below it that's heating it up. And also from some of the regional geophysics we have, that there's a clear indication that there is an intrusion there as well.
You mentioned the Eagle Mine, which is a heap leach operation. I can't recall what the grade is, but when I hear a heap leach, I think it's kind of bulk tonnage, low grade. You said that valley is kind of a 1 kilometer across intrusion, which makes me think that it's potentially a bulk tonnage. Have you got any indication of kind of what grade? I know you haven't got the holes back yet, but are you looking at, is this a bulk tonnage, low grade, 0.5 to 1 gram a ton target? Or have you managed to adjust your thinking on it thanks to data?
It is, but that's sort of the baseline. And one thing that really excites us about this area is these very high grade structures that cut through. And so you do have these big sulfide bearing zones that assay consistently in the tens of grams and often ounce per ton to up to the 152 gram figure that I've thrown around a few times. So these are some nice, really high grade structures. And so what we're looking at is, at the base level is, yes, a big bulk tonnage, multi-million ounce deposit that could be workable out here. And that might be, in that 0.5 to 1 gram per ton range, depending on how big it is and what the geometry is and so on. But we're also looking at the potential for these sweeteners. And if you have that as your baseline, and then you get into, every once in a while, you get into a meter thick zone of ounce per ton stuff, that's really going to improve the economics of a project. And
is the grade carried? I know it's early days and you haven't got your core back and you haven't got thin sections back and all of that stuff. You haven't done your petrography. But do you feel that the grade is just in the sheeted veins, or is there disseminated mineralization in the intrusive, in the kind of the matrix of the rock as well?
So specifically talking about these targets at Rogue and the Valley target here, based on what we have seen elsewhere, or based on other models or other deposits that are similar to this model, such as Fort Knox, such as Eagle. Yes, it's basically these veins that carry the grade through relatively barren, intrusive and host rock. That said, the Hornfels, you could have chemical reactions with fluids there that you might get into some grades in between the veins as well. But that's at this point, that's speculating.
So it's a fracture density game. It's the intensity of veining which is going to be driving the overall grades.
That's right. The intensity, and of course, the grades of the veins themselves. Yeah.
Good. And the core you've seen. So how many you've drilled? 5 holes, is that right, at Rogue?
4
holes, and you got some VG. I mean, and that was presumably in the little vein. That's not in the.
That's right.
Pull that slide up again. Let's have another look at that core.
Yeah. So this was a very nice surprise. So we knew that the sheeted veins were there. We still don't know their extent. We have good evidence that they extend for a pretty long area, about 900 meters plus, based on the geochem and based on some of our surface observations. But we didn't know that the width, probably, well, the geochem anomaly is at least 150 meters. We've seen them over that width. It could be wider than that as well. And again, it's sort of similar to the Jupiter target, where you have this some exposure in the valley bottom. You get these big U-shaped valleys with glaciers, and then as you get towards the edges, you kind of get till and other cover. So, but yeah, we're looking at. Oh, sorry.
Did you drill across that sheeted package?
So we did. Yes, 2 of the holes were going more perpendicular to the sheeted veining, and 2 of the holes were. They were still cutting across it. You can see the angle in these holes. It's not perfectly perpendicular, but they were targeting structures on the edge of the intrusion as well as the sheeted veining themselves. And yeah, going back to the visible gold, you're right. It is in the veins, and it's a nice surprise. At this point, I don't want to lean on it too heavily. Of course, it's always great to see gold in your drill core, and we weren't expecting to see gold in the drill core, but it remains a grade and density game for these veins. So we're very excited to see both the visible gold, and we're very excited to get these assays back when they finally do come in.
And if you get comparable kind of gram meters to here, I'm just going to pop this down a bit just so that if you get comparable gram meters, say in your Rogue Valley drill hole to your what's the Einarson and Jupiter drill hole, if you get, let's say you're going to do an even split, just for a hypothetical basis, does that mean you've got a target zone? So let's say the Rogue Valley is mineralized. Does that mean you've got a target zone which is as long as that sheeted vein structure is long and as wide as that sheeted vein structure is wide?
That's a good question. I would say yes, but it would, we would certainly have to drill that out to prove it. We can't just say, okay, the veins go here and here, and we got this hole through, and there's a resource.
No. I'm not saying that. But I'm talking about targets. That's something that you would want to test, because if the few drill holes that come in, then you'll want to test the rest of it. Absolutely,
yeah, and that's what I was getting at earlier on when you were asking about the, how are we going to allocate our resources next season? A lot of that allocation does depend on how these holes look when they come back, and the other nice thing is that in these systems, typically these veins do go quite deep as well. So that's obviously the third factor. But yeah, it's nice to know that in other deposit environments, you can keep hitting them down to great depths. So we'll see how low in the system we ultimately are, but we should have a ways to go.
And of course, everything depends on those results, which hopefully will be out in a month or two. Now, we all know that exploration is hit or miss. So far we know that Jupiter's hit. We don't know quite yet whether Rogue Valley has, because even though we've got even though you've got the visible gold, you can't be sure. But you've got a pipeline of other projects. The one I particularly liked was Tosh. Can you tell me a bit about that, please?
So Tosh is, and let me see if I have a slide on that right here. So Tosh is down in the southwest Yukon. It's similar to, in a similar geological setting to the White Gold District, if for people who know the Yukon and its exploration history, but it's outside of the White Gold District, so it missed that big rush, apart from us using some of our resources from our other projects to go and explore here ourselves. And we've found several interesting geochemical anomalies. And so this is another orogenic gold target. This would be deeper. You have higher metamorphic grades and kind of more typical of what you'd see for an orogenic gold target. But it's really a large area. We have about 15 kilometers staked there along a trend where we're seeing multiple geochem anomalies up to 2 kilometers long, where you're having these gold and multi-element soil anomalies, and then and some really interesting grab samples that are coming off the surface. So we've also done a little bit of geophysics out there, VLF, basically ground electromagnetics, that really does seem to pick up on some of these structures well. It's it's never been drilled, still fairly early stage, but some really we're basically at that similar stage that we were at with Rogue and Einarson. We just had to choose where to focus. Tosh actually nearly came out as the flagship project for several companies who are interested in it, and we opted to keep it as a sort of a hedge. If the Einarson and Rogue projects didn't work out, or if they don't work out, but we continue to have that hedge, and we want to continue to advance Tosh without spreading our resources too thin. And then it's either a hedge if for whatever reason things up to the northeast don't work out, or if things continue to go well up there, then we could start to look at different ways to extract value from this, whether it's a JV or a sale or something else altogether.
So just by way of explanation, Scott's had a few internet issues. We've decided to kind of crack on because I've only got a few more minutes left of questions, I think. And we've decided to proceed with Scott just on audio and no video. So the question I wanted to ask you was, talk me through your the expense of operating in the Yukon, and how much budget you're going to have, and how much meterage you're going to be able to drill, and how much progress you're actually going to make next year in what is, I think, a pretty short field season.
Well, I guess one of the expenses of working in the Yukon is unreliable video feed. So there's one of the costs right up front, but certainly yeah, I think that a lot of the expenses that are associated with working in the Yukon, there are higher sticker tags on a lot of things, but those are more than offset by the opportunities that we have in the geology here. And I think when you look at successful projects here, the dollars per ounce are really quite competitive on a global scale. So, and especially when you look at terrain like we're looking at that is underexplored to unexplored, and with the caliber of targets that we're stumbling into, it certainly makes a cost competitive argument for doing what we're doing, which is why we're doing it. As far as exploration,
so what you effectively mean is that the cost per meter is high, but the ounces discovered per meter is also high. That's
correct. Yeah, and then you can also go down into the rabbit holes of which we have gone down into, and like what we saw of land holding costs and so on in the Yukon. To hold a similar piece of ground in Nevada, not only would you basically not be able to find something so prospective and so big and acquire it, but if you somehow did, you would be paying over, I think, about $1.6 million US just in your claim maintenance fees annually. And so, that goes a long way towards drilling, towards helicopter and so on. Whereas in the Yukon, all of that money that you put into drilling and put into helicopter goes into the ground. So, so we have something to show for that first 1.6 million. We have a lot to show for it. And whereas in Nevada, that would just be money off the table every year on a property package this size.
Okay.
Interesting. And yeah, I'm not trying to skirt your initial question there about our plans for next season, which I'm very excited to talk about. We are looking at doing about 10,000 meters of drilling out there next season. We should be plenty of cash in hand to do that and to do meaningful surface work, and while advancing our secondary targets around both projects.
Scott, I wish you every luck with it. I'm going to watch for those news releases with great interest when they come out, either later this year or early next year. Good luck with the capital raise, and hopefully we'll get you back on to tell us more about various discovery and exploration successes in the future. Fingers crossed.
That sounds great, Merlin. Thank you very much for taking the time, and my apologies for the technical issues on this end. I'm not sure what's going on with the internet up here today, but yeah, it's great to chat, and I look forward to the assays as well. Thanks for having us.
Good stuff.